Hello, my name is Bree, and I'd like to welcome you to my channel, Breezy Banter, a place where I talk about the things I want to talk about. In today's video, I thought we could just have some fun and talk about some contentious topics, particularly within the beauty community. These are the topics that I enjoy reading about because I think they pertain to morality and ethics, and that's just a subject that, or those are subjects that I'm inherently interested in. And people have some pretty strong opinions on some of these things. And so I figured, why not just give mine? Before I get started, I know I'm in yet another new space, and I figured I would try coming out here where there's some light. I recognize I'm being lit on like one side of my face, but there isn't really a better way to set this up, at least not currently. But I hope it's not too bad. If it is, let me know and I'll try to figure it out. But for the time being, I appreciate your patience. The first topic that I want to discuss is PR. And the reason that I am picking this one first is because I think it is, as I mentioned in the introduction, I think that this is a topic that a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions on. And I personally have some fairly strong opinions on it. So when it comes to PR, I generally don't like it. And there's a multitude of reasons for that. So I think fundamentally what gets me is, let's say I watch a beauty influencer using a product that they received in PR. If I then decide to go out and buy that product, not only have I paid for that product in using my time to watch a beauty influencer and then actually bought the product, so using my money, but because they received it for free, that money's coming from somewhere. They received it for free. I did not receive it for free as a consumer. So my purchase is thereby subsidizing them getting it for free. And so in a weird way, you're like paying to advertise to yourself and then paying when you actually purchase the product. So it's really weird. I feel like most consumers don't think about PR in this way, but ever since I've thought of this, I just can't not think about it in this way, that I'm paying to advertise to myself. And I detest advertisements with a passion, so the idea kind of fundamentally squicks me out. And I also think that PR fundamentally alters the relationship that beauty influencers have with products. If you are not paying for something, I think it is very, very difficult to have an objective lens when evaluating that product. If, for example, you receive a $20 eyeliner and it's okay, but you know that you stand to gain by talking it up, it's really easy to build up the product. Whereas if you spent $20 and perhaps that's a bit more money than you would normally spend on an eyeliner, you're going to be a lot more critical of that product because of it. It's almost like influencers don't have skin in the game when it comes to beauty products when they receive them in PR. There's one book in particular that this reminds me of, and it's called Skin in the Game: Hidden Asymmetries in Daily Life, which is written by one of my favorite authors, Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And without having skin in the game, it just makes that person's review that much less credible. And beauty influencers can tell us, like, I'm gonna give you my honest truth, I'm allowed to say XYZ, etc. But that doesn't actually mean that that's what they're doing. The other thing about PR is that it creates a lot of unnecessary waste. I'm sure we've all seen videos of people receiving PR that just have boxes and boxes and boxes behind them full of plastic and stuff that generally can't really be recycled, and it's for products that they have hundreds of in their collection. And maybe they'll use it one time in a video, but maybe not. And even if they do use it multiple times, it's very unlikely that they'll use up their makeup the way that I would wager the vast majority of average consumers do. I know that there are some people who absolutely don't use up their makeup, but I suspect those are people who have large collections, more akin to what a beauty influencer might have. I think back to a time that I went shopping with my sister once for makeup, and she watches some beauty YouTube, but certainly not a lot. And I remember she was looking for an eyeshadow palette, and I think at the time she might have had two. I think one was from Tarte and one was from Morphe. And she was trying to find a neutral eyeshadow palette for work, and she went into a Sephora. I was with her, and she eventually decided to get a Pat McGrath Mothership palette. And to her, that was like her big makeup purchase of the year. And she loves that palette. She uses it like every day. She uses it for her work makeup. And it's so difficult to see that and then see the way that some beauty influencers treat like what is a really expensive palette from someone like Pat McGrath as just a normal Tuesday purchase. It also just kind of reminds me of a simpler time. When I first started watching beauty YouTube, Natasha Denona was somewhat frequently referred to as Natasha Denono because her products are really expensive, and people talked about it and how this is a luxury high-end product. If you're purchasing one of her eyeshadow palettes, you're dropping a lot of money on them. And people would make comments about how, like, if it's not going to apply itself to my eyeshadows for that price, then it's not worth it. And it's interesting to see that the way the beauty community has shifted and has been a lot more accommodating to makeup at higher price points. And it's just a bit interesting to see. I know inflation has been a thing, but sometimes I wonder, when people talk about not being able to afford things, I'm wondering how much is it, like, if you feel like you can't afford Natasha Denona palettes right now, was that what you were buying 7 years ago, or were you happy with your $15 ColourPop palette? I am curious. I know for some, like, obviously I'm not downplaying inflation. I recognize that for a lot of people, like, buying groceries is hard right now. But I think when it comes to more discretionary spending, like makeup, there's kind of an expectation of buying more and more expensive makeup in a way that doesn't necessarily translate to increased quality. I think another thing that I dislike about PR is I've heard a lot of kind of the smaller beauty YouTubers who I tend to enjoy and tend to watch be really afraid to voice any negative opinion of a product because they want to stay on the PR list. And that's really disappointing because there's kind of a chicken and egg here. So some people will only speak positively about a product because they want to remain on a PR list, and even if they did buy a product themselves, if they want to get on a PR list, then they're only going to talk positively about that product. That means that even the products that they've personally purchased, the reviews of those products are less credible, in my personal opinion. I also quite dislike when people are talking about PR, and in order to seem more relatable, because some influencers have caught on to this, basically what I'm saying, where you can't just be 100% positive about a product. So you have to throw in some negatives and or talk about, like, well, I have oily skin and this product didn't really work for me, but if you have normal to dry skin, then I think this would work great. Things like that. And to me, this just comes across as it becomes very clear that they're selling a product at the end of the day because they're not someone that has in this example, the skin type that they're recommending it for. They can't actually test that, and they can't actually say what they're saying with any real evidence behind it. They're just kind of assuming that that would be the case. And again, that's just disappointing to see. And before anyone comes in here and tells me, like, well, PR is really useful, I think the other thing that also gets to me is I've heard some beauty influencers talk about, like, if they receive PR, then they can put up a video for it before it is released, for example. But I also wish that we could just kind of slow down in terms of purchases. Like, I don't like the idea of having to watch someone's video 2 days before the product releases and then setting a reminder for myself so I know that when it launches, I'm on my computer at that time so I can buy that product. I just want to avoid all that. Like, let's go back to healthy release schedules and having enough supply of the product in question so people don't get FOMO. Before anyone tells me that PR works because companies wouldn't send out PR if they didn't see a return on investment. For one, I would say that might be true. There are lots of companies that send out PR that have gone under. I'm thinking companies like BH Cosmetics. And on the other hand, that can still be true. Like, it might be profitable for them, but I think we should question why it's profitable for them. So those are my thoughts on PR, at least in this point in time, as someone who has never received PR. Next, let's talk about sponsorships. I've read a variety of opinions on sponsorships where I've seen some people say that they enjoy sponsorships that are related to the content in which the person is known for. So for example, a beauty influencer being sponsored by a beauty company. On the other hand, I've also seen some people say it seems like a conflict of interest, so they're more interested in hearing from someone or hearing someone be sponsored by a company that's not at all related to their particular industry. So a beauty influencer being sponsored by, say, a jewelry company. I don't have particularly strong opinions on this. I think sponsorships in general, you just need to view them as an ad. That's what it is. I think the vast majority of influencers will stay away from the known kind of bad sponsors, for lack of a better word. But when it comes to a paycheck, a lot of them are happily willing to do a sponsorship for just kind of anyone that will throw money at them. And I think the other thing that gets me with sponsorships is when I see a wide variety of the beauty influencers that I watch all being sponsored by the same company all at the same time. Like, it's very clear to me when, for example, Merit is doing a sponsorship run, because like 20% of the YouTubers that I watch will have a Merit sponsorship. Same thing with Anna Luisa. And most recently I saw this with, I think the company name is Halara. And it was literally like video after video of the same thing. Everyone in the first 10 minutes of their video would do their try on, would show you the outfit from afar, talk about how great the material is and all the sizing and like all of that. And it just becomes abundantly clear when you see that same thing over and over again that they're being paid to sell particular points. Sometimes people will make a financial decision to do something like this, and other people will say like, well, who are you to tell them how to make their money? Like, get that bag, do what you gotta do. But being a beauty influencer is a choice. I don't believe that these people don't have other career options available to them. And so I think there is a way, I think it is healthy to be critical of people that are trying to sell you things. And I think as soon as something like this becomes public, as it is when making an ad, we have the right to critique it and to comment on it and say like, are these your real thoughts, or are these the talking points that you've been told to say? Next, let's talk about plastic surgery. So I think I've said my opinion on this to some friends before and they ended up agreeing with me, but I do feel like it's kind of looked down on to have the opinion that I do, which is I don't fault any individual person for getting plastic surgery. I'm never going to tell someone what to do with their body. You do what you want to do. But I do think that getting plastic surgery at an individual level contributes to collective values around beauty. And by that I mean, for example, research shows that there's a nose type, for example, or like a nose shape that is broadly viewed as being quote unquote the most beautiful. And some people that don't have that nose shape will change their nose to look like that. And I 1000% understand the variety of reasons why somebody would choose to do that. Being self-conscious isn't something to laugh at. I understand wanting to feel comfortable in your skin. I understand making small changes while still maintaining some semblance of who you are can be beneficial to one's mental health, etc., etc. However, by removing that variance in kind of just human features, I think it does further perpetuate the idea that that particular nose shape is the most desirable one. And I think this is something that people don't want to talk about because we want to support or at least this is something I don't necessarily want to talk about it this way, because if a friend has plastic surgery, I don't want to be like, well, good for you, but by the way, you're contributing to this negative beauty standard. But I think that is true. And again, like, of course I'm going to support my friend. I want them to be happy in their body, but there is this kind of negative side effect that's felt at the societal level, whereas the positive side effect is being felt at the individual level. And like I said, I'm never going to tell someone to not do something with their body. If that's what they want to do, like, by all means, do it. I do just think it's kind of sad, and I wish we could be more encouraging of people to accept themselves as who they are and widening our view of what we consider to be beautiful. And that might be a pipe dream, I'm sure it is. I personally very much like imperfections. If somebody has, or quote unquote imperfections, if somebody has a scar, I don't know, that's like, that tells a part of your life. If you have a mole, that's like, it's interesting, it's a unique identifier. And I wish we could view things in that way more often, rather than making people feel like they have to fit into a very, very narrowly defined mold of what is considered beautiful. Next, I'm going to briefly talk about what I consider to be unnecessary steps in a makeup routine. I mentioned this in previous videos, but one product in particular that I just do not understand the point of is bronzer. And I've personally owned exactly one bronzer in my lifetime, and I got rid of it after several years of owning it. And whenever I see beauty influencers putting on bronzer on camera, the before and after, to me, they look literally the exact same. Like there's no difference. If you ask me what's the difference between these two pictures, I'm like the woman from that Office meme where it's like they're the same picture. And I also don't understand people's fascination with brows. I know there's been some talk about how brow trends can really define certain segments of time. Like the overly plucked trend is something that I'm sure many people around my age can remember. And I feel like kind of feathered brows right now or laminated brows right now are kind of slowly dying out, but still a thing. And I just don't really understand it. I feel like I just kind of miss people not drawing in their eyebrows. Like whatever happened to just regular eyebrows, like just brushing them through and like that's it. It just seems like an extra step that doesn't really need to exist, but it does. And I suspect it's because it means selling extra products. But like, I don't know. I just don't understand it. To me, it's like styling like peach fuzz. It's like, you don't need to. It's just there. Like, it's fine as it is. Next, I'm going to very briefly talk about get readies with me and two things in particular that annoy me. And the first is when YouTubers are doing get ready with me, but they don't show all the steps. It's not uncommon for someone to say, okay, I'm gonna go finish this look off camera. Like, I'm gonna go do my mascara off camera. And I don't understand that. I personally think some of the things that they will do on camera are more interesting than others. But for example, I don't need to watch someone apply concealer any more than I need to watch someone apply mascara, but one of those is always shown on camera and one of them is rarely shown on camera. And I just find it a bit strange. I don't know if it's like they don't want there to be silence as they're doing it. Like, I understand putting on mascara, a lot of people tend to not talk when they're doing that, but it does just come across as odd to me. Like, are they not showing it because technique isn't really involved, but like some of the things that they do, I feel like does involve some level of technique, or like some technique is required. I just don't really understand it. And the next thing that I dislike is using lashes to finish a look. There's two YouTubers in particular, don't really want to name them because this isn't that big of a deal, but they almost always put on a false lash to finish their look. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. I just think that it takes what is often a solid look and it detracts from the makeup, basically. By that I mean, it's almost like if somebody was styling someone's hair and they did like gorgeous ringlets, and then they were like, okay, let me just go off camera for a second and put in these hair extensions. And it's like, okay, sure, you can do that, but like, now I can't really see the work, all of the work that you just did. And I don't like that. I like seeing the work. I like seeing the way it would look with a more natural lash. Most people don't wear false lashes every day. So seeing makeup just always being finished with a false lash is not the most helpful in terms of whether or not a eyeshadow palette will necessarily work for day to day, at least for me. Okay, and I have 3 more unpopular opinions / ranty things that I want to talk about. I was thinking about this because I watched Shauna Rapari's video that was released yesterday about, or no, it was released a couple days ago about like Shein hauls. And I fundamentally don't understand Shein or Temu hauls, and in kind of like a bigger way, or a bigger way than I've heard a lot of people talk about. So I know a lot of people have mentioned like the horrible environmental effects, the awful working conditions for the people that have to make this stuff, the promotion of overconsumption, etc. But I think what I fundamentally don't understand about Shein or Temu is 2 things. I don't deny that hauls can do quite well on YouTube. However, it seems to me like there are 2 reasons for that, and Shein and Temu hauls kind of miss the mark for both of them. And the first one is, I know a lot of people, when they talk about shopping, they are on like a hunt for a deal. And Shein and Temu, like, that's automatically built in to their business model, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like, you know that you're going to be paying rock bottom prices just off the bat. They're not going to be charging you $100 for a skirt. They're going to be charging you like $1.70 for a skirt. So you're not chasing a deal in this case. You're not really getting that feeling of chasing a deal. And I've seen that reason be cited particularly by YouTubers like Lauren May Beauty, who have been excited at the idea of getting a makeup product that they've wanted for a really long time at a hugely discounted rate. But that just doesn't exist. So I don't really understand that aspect of these hauls. The other is, I think when people do hauls, part of it is that they're flexing. They're flexing that they're wealthy, that they're able to afford all of these things. They have the space to accommodate all of these things. This is a drop in the bucket to them. Depending on the YouTuber, they might do regular hauls. And so that means not only are they capable of doing this once, but they're capable of doing it on an ongoing basis. And I think that that is meant as part of a flex. But again, when it comes to Shein and Temu, because the prices are so cheap, I don't, like, it's not really a flex, or it doesn't seem to me like it would be a flex to say, I got 100 items for $500, because it's like, you're inherently talking about the value of these things. The value of these things is low given what you bought them for, and then I would think in turn that that would become less of a flex. Like, you're bragging about getting lots of things really cheaply that you knew would be really cheap. So what's the appeal? The only thing that I can think of is that the appeal is just having lots and lots of stuff in and of itself, which I fundamentally I don't understand that mentality at all. I hate clutter, and the idea of just having like 100 things coming into my life all at once is like horrifying. I think I'd be really anxious about it. So I was just thinking about this, and my ideas on this aren't that well fleshed out at this point in time, but I thought it was interesting to talk about, and I was reminded of it because of Shauna's video, which I will link in the description box down below. Two more things. Next, I wanted to talk about affiliate codes, and the reason for this is, and I can't remember the company for the life of me, but there was a company that I saw probably like 2 years ago, and they had made a post probably on Instagram, and they said something like, the prices of this palette are going to be $70. You can find coupon codes from your favorite influencers for 10% off. The price of the palette takes into account the fact that you will use an affiliate code. I thought that was really interesting, but also kind of frustrating, because I know, for example, if I go to the mall and I see a store advertising 50% off, like, okay, maybe they brought in a shirt that was $100, but they knew that they wanted to sell it for $50. So they'll leave it at $100 for a month and then mark it down to $50. And then you can advertise 50% off as though like you're actually getting a good deal, but no, that was like the price that they wanted to sell it at to start with. Having it so explicitly stated by a brand, like you're almost expected to use an affiliate code, is, I think what really rubbed me the wrong way is it feels like it's preying on people's desire to get a deal. And a different way of doing it would be to still offer an affiliate code, but that code gets affiliated with a particular person, but you don't get a discount for it. Like, okay, if it's a $70 palette, discount code is 10%, so they actually want to sell it at 63, that's what they expect to sell it at, then just sell it at 63 and people can still input an affiliate code. I think the other reason affiliate codes kind of irritate me is because it's a way of doing free, it's a way for companies to do free research under the guise of giving you a deal, but when they take it into account in terms of their pricing, you aren't getting that deal, right? Like it's all fake, just kind of at the end of the day. And by this I mean, for example, I'm aware that there are some companies that rely entirely on customers' experience to determine quality. And they do that via things like customer satisfaction surveys. So for example, I went to a USPS store and I've been told like, hey, here's your receipt, and at the bottom there's a survey that you can fill out. And by filling out that survey, I'm doing work for USPS to tell them what their quality of service is like, and they get that from me for free. They don't have to pay someone to go and do whatever it is that people who investigate quality do themselves. Or maybe they do still do that, but they do it to a lesser degree. But I dislike that idea of having that work be downloaded onto the consumer and expected to be done by the consumer for free. I also think that by doing that, you encourage just extremist opinions. I've heard it time and time again that if you work in customer service and you send someone a survey, it's not uncommon for them to say, please don't rate me average, please don't rate me 4 out of 5. Like, you have to say, this person did great, this person was awesome, this person was perfect. You have to give that level of feedback to them for them to see positive outcomes, for example, like a bonus or a raise or whatever. But that said, I think the people who are most likely to respond to surveys are A, those who feel wronged by a company for whatever reason, and then B, people who have absolutely amazing experiences, and then C, everyone else. But I think what you want is to hear from all segments of the population. You want to hear from all 3 groups of people. So I don't really like that practice. Lastly, I want to talk about ColourPop releasing tons of releases. And I think this is really interesting because I feel like there was a time where the beauty community just kind of lost all feelings of accountability. By that I mean, there was a time when ColourPop was releasing something new at least once a week for like a year on end. And so many people complained about it and how wasteful and awful and everything it was. This was also a time when ColourPop had a bit of a chokehold on the beauty community. But just because ColourPop was releasing something didn't mean that you had to buy it. And this holds for both consumers and beauty influencers. Like, you're not under obligation. You're not under contract to have to purchase their products. So just because they're coming out with 6 eyeshadow palettes in a month doesn't mean you need to buy it. It doesn't need to be wasteful. I think almost always, I don't want to say blame, but I think almost always we need to look at the demand side of things as opposed to the supplier side of things. And this was a time where I feel like the supplier was critiqued for supplying things, but people were demanding them of them. Of course, a company is, and I don't want to like bootlick ColourPop's approach here because I very much prefer slow, well thought out releases. But I also think it kind of goes back to what I was talking about PR. Like, of course they're going to do it if it makes them money. And it did make them money. They found that was likely the best business approach that they could have. And so I would just rather see customers say like, hey, I don't agree with the way that ColourPop is handling this, therefore I won't be purchasing, go on with their lives. And then perhaps if enough people did that, maybe ColourPop would have eased off. And it seems like by and large at this point they have eased off, although I suspect that's for a variety of reasons. But I think there's just a weird way in which people talk about makeup and beauty releases where they feel like compelled to buy. I've said before, but just because something's new doesn't mean you need to buy it. Just because you think something's pretty doesn't mean you need to buy it. I think people really need to take in general, harder look at what things add value to their life and whether purchasing a new product really makes them happy in the long term, or would financial security really make you happy in the long term. And I recognize that can be hard. It requires restraint, it requires discipline, but I think people will be so much better off if they develop and work on flexing those muscles. I think it's just disappointing to me to see so much of the blame be put on ColourPop, particularly because my understanding is the way ColourPop's like factories and whatnot are set up is they basically didn't really have waste. Like they're not throwing out old product because so often almost all of their releases would sell out. So to me, there's no wasted product, and that reflects on consumers, right? Like they would have wasted product if consumers weren't buying it, and then they might know, okay, we need to make less. But that's just not what happened. And so I wish people would stop incentivizing that type of behavior by companies instead of just expecting companies to not do it in the first place. I recognize in a perfect world, companies would do better, but I think that's a bit of a pipe dream. And instead, we as consumers should look to what we can do with our actions, with our dollars, to prod companies in the direction that we want them to go. I feel like so often I take the side of consumers, and I can kind of poo-poo like the beauty influencer community. I can kind of poo-poo big corporate companies. And so this is kind of the one where it just struck me as a bit odd. I guess when I was reading, there was so much discourse about this particular topic, and it didn't really sit right with me. So this one is kind of a standout opinion from from the groups that I tend to normally side with. So that was the video for today. Those are my unpopular opinions, or things that I just kind of wanted to rant about. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. If you'd like to do more than that, I'll have a few links in the description that you can use to support me further. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the things that I've shared today? And do you have any unpopular opinions yourself? Before I go, I'd like to take a minute to thank you for taking time out of your day to spend watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Thank you.